Steal. The Okinawans simply refer to it as Okinawa no Sensho, Okinawan War. Although a conquered nation for many centuries, first as a tributary of China, then as a colony of Japan, Okinawa has never known such carnage. For 82 days, thousands of planes dropped hundreds of thousands of bombs on the island, crushing and burning countless creatures, plants, houses, and buildings. For 82 days, hundreds of thousands of troops invaded the island, wielding tanks and guns, throwing grenades and shooting into hiding places. 140,000 Okinawans, a third of the population, were killed. That does not account for all those who died of injury, illness, starvation after the battle. That does not account for all those who were forced to commit suicide. Of those killed, some were conscripted soldiers called boetai, boys as young as 12, ordered to fight in the front lines. Some were nurses or members of relief teams called gyutai, girls as young as 14, ordered to cook and tend to the wounded. The rest were civilians. 120,000 civilians, who died in a war they didn't choose, sacrificed to protect Japan, the precious mainland. Many Okinawans believe that those who died had died in vain, or rather what they refer to as a dog's death, inujini. When news spread that Okinawa would soon be attacked, Oba was living by herself with her 4 children, my mother's older brother and older 3 sisters. My grandfather, conscripted 4 years earlier, was somewhere in Korea, being held prisoner. When the sirens blared, days before the troops landed, before the ships could be seen from shore, Oba and her 4 children, her son, age 4, and her 3 daughters, ages 3, 5, and 7, grabbed sacks of potatoes they had been gathering and storing for months. They hid in caves while the ground shook with each explosion, while their island, their home, crumbled and turned to ash. They fled from cave to cave while their sacks emptied, while their clothes loosened and unraveled from their shrinking bodies. For 2 years after the war, they wandered from camp to camp, slept in tents or under tarps. They bathed in the ocean. They ate what they could scavenge. They collected rain and drew from low, muddy wells for drinking. When my grandfather returned from Korea, he was a different person. He returned, but he was gone. Somehow, Oba kept herself and her 4 children alive and unharmed through one of the most horrific battles in history, a story I wish she could have told me. Yet these memories are impossible to forget, regardless of whether we actually lived through them. I believe they stay in our bodies, as sickness, as addiction, as poor posture or a tendency toward apology, as a deepened capacity for sadness or anger, as determination to survive, a relentless tempered optimism. I believe they are inherited, passed on to us like brown eyes or the shape of a nose. I had not learned this history, my mother's history, my history, until I was 34 years old, which is to say that I grew up not knowing my mother or myself. 3 years after the war, my mother was born. She was born into poverty and chaos. She was born into a family, an entire people, stunned by violence and grief. When my mother was born, Okinawa was still considered an enemy territory. This meant that the occupying U.S. military was under no obligation to restore the battered landscape, and Okinawa was still a vast ruin of decay and rubble. This meant that the occupying U.S. military guarded and patrolled the wreckage of an island, and Okinawans relied on bare subsistence rations of bread and milk, cans of red chili, popcorn, and candy. Some of the troops gave the prettiest girls bright new clothes to wear and called them honeys. Some of the troops broke into homes, robbed and raped Okinawans inside homes, because there were no laws against it. No laws at all. In 1952, 3 years after my mother was born, around the age she would have formed her first memory, Japan officially relinquished rule of Okinawa to the United States. My mother witnessed the U.S. military devouring the island, constructing